For many years, humanity had watched the stars from afar. They had dreamed of joining the great powers in space, of sitting beside the oldest and wisest alien civilizations. Finally, after long talks and trials, Earth was invited to join the Galaxy Council, a massive group of alien leaders who made the big decisions for the galaxy. People on Earth celebrated the news. It felt like a moment of pride, a big step forward. Everyone thought this was a sign that humans were finally seen as equals. Ships flew flags, news channels showed smiling faces. There were parades and speeches filled with hope. When humanity's first group of ambassadors entered the giant council hall for the first time, they were amazed. The building was massive, floating in deep space, filled with beings from hundreds of different worlds. Each species looked different, some with glowing skin, others with wings or fur or multiple arms. Some floated, some walked, some used machines to move. At first, the humans felt nervous, but they stood tall, smiling, and respectful. They listened to the other council members, shared their thoughts politely, and offered help whenever needed. Humans wanted to prove they could be peaceful, fair, and useful. But soon, things started to feel strange. The other members didn't really listen. When humans spoke, others often talked over them or rolled their eyes. Their ideas were pushed aside or delayed. When it was time to vote, humans always seemed to be the last to speak. And even then, their votes didn't seem to matter much. One alien leader even laughed after a human speech and said, "Let the children play." That moment spread quietly across the galaxy. Too many council members, humans were seen as too new, too emotional. It's too soft to be taken seriously. Still, the human ambassadors didn't give up. They kept attending meetings. They followed the rules. They offered help in peace missions and science work. They didn't complain. They just hoped in time things would change. But behind the friendly handshakes and smiles, something darker was happening. Earth's trade ships were being stopped more often than before. Alien customs officers would delay them for hours, sometimes days, over tiny problems. Human technology shipments were being copied or stolen. Colonies on far planets were suddenly being taxed more than others. No one gave clear answers when asked why human scientists noticed their research was being used without credit. Tech was showing up in alien markets under different names. But every time they raised a question, the council brushed it aside with polite excuses. One of the ambassadors started to notice the pattern. She kept quiet but took notes. She tracked changes in trade numbers and watched how votes in the council were handled. Slowly, it became clear. There was a quiet effort to keep humanity weak, to keep them busy with small things so they couldn't rise. But Earth stayed calm. Its leaders told people to be patient. This is just politics, they said. Time will earn their respect. Back on Earth, people were starting to get frustrated. They saw their ships delayed, their scientists ignored, their colonies treated unfairly. Some began asking if joining the council had been a mistake. Most still hoped for peace and fairness. Humans are patient. But even patience has a limit. At this point, no one could see what was coming. The humans were still smiling in meetings, still following the rules, still offering help, but deep inside, something was changing. A quiet fire was starting to grow, not of anger, but of clarity, of understanding they had joined the council with. Trust and respect. But what they found was something very different, and if things didn't change soon, humanity might decide it was time to stop holding back. Things didn't get better. In fact, they slowly got worse. At first it was hard to notice. A small delay here, a denied request there. But over time, the pattern became clearer. Humanity was being pushed down. Not with weapons or open threats, but through rules, silence, and quiet tricks. One of the human ambassadors started noticing it more than others. Every time she submitted a new idea for trade or cooperation, it was either under review or sent to a never-ending list of committees. No other species had to wait this long. Some got answers in days. Humans waited for months. When she tried to ask why, the other members gave polite smiles, but their eyes told the truth. They didn't care. Some didn't even look her in the eye anymore. Few even acted like she wasn't there. Reports came in from Earth's colonies, too. A cargo ship carrying medicine to a small human outpost was stopped for 5 days by alien patrols. The excuse? Unclear label on the package. Another shipment of farming tools disappeared somewhere between checkpoints. No one ever found. It at a research lab orbiting a neutral planet, human scientists made a breakthrough in energy technology. A few weeks later, that same idea showed up in a council-run science center with a different name and no credit to Earth. The council called it a coincidence. But it was happening too often to be chance. The ambassador kept quiet in public. But she began collecting everything. Records, messages, council reports, even footage from other diplomats. The more she looked, the more she realized it wasn't just ignorance or arrogance. It was a quiet effort to keep humans from growing too strong. They were being kept in the background, controlled, used, back on Earth. News channels showed cheerful council updates, but behind the cameras, people were growing restless. Scientists were frustrated. Traders were angry. And soldiers. They were preparing. Just in case. Then came the meeting that changed everything. The council had called a session to discuss a failed peace mission between 2 rival alien species. The humans weren't even part of that mission. When blame was passed around, somehow the final finger pointed at Earth. One of the older council members stood and said, "Perhaps the humans cause confusion with their emotional ways." That comment stayed in the air like poison. No one defended Earth. No one even questioned it. The ambassador spoke calmly, but her voice carried weight. "We were not involved. We were never even informed of the mission," but her words didn't matter. The council moved on, as if she had said nothing at all. That night, back in her quarters, she sat alone, staring at the stars outside the window. There were no tears, just silence. Her hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of truth. Humanity had tried. They had come in peace. It followed every rule, bent over backward to show respect. And yet they were treated like intruders. She recorded a short message for Earth Command. It wasn't dramatic, just honest. We are not equals here. They don't see us as partners. They see us as tools. We need to rethink everything. The message was sent in secret. On Earth, it reached only a small group of people, but the right people. Across human space, quiet meetings began. Colonies started double-checking their defense systems. Old warships hidden in storage were reactivated. Engineers worked through the night in deep space labs. No one said the word war. But they all knew what was coming. For now, humans were still sitting at the table, still wearing the smile. But behind that smile, something was changing. Had been patient. They'd been polite, but now they were watching, remembering, preparing. The Galaxy Council didn't notice it yet, but they would soon know. One expected what happened next. There was a human medical station on a small, peaceful moon called Veganine. It wasn't a military base. Didn't carry weapons. It was just a place where doctors and nurses helped people, human and alien, who were injured or sick. Families lived there. Children played in the gardens. The station helped hundreds of lives every week. One morning, everything changed. Without warning, the station was attacked. It wasn't a small incident. It was a full strike fast, brutal and deadly. Explosions ripped through the buildings. The main power went down. Emergency systems tried to keep people alive, but the damage was too much. Over 3,000 lives were lost, many of them children. The news hit Earth like a hammer. The council released a short message just hours later. They blamed the attack on a small pirate group with no clear name or goal. So they offered deep regret and moved on to the next topic. No full investigation. No justice. No answers. But humans weren't so quick to move on. Footage from the station's backup systems showed something strange. The ships used in the attack were not old, beat-up pirate ships. They were new, clean, and they carried technology that only council members had access to. One of the damaged drones even had parts with serial numbers that traced back to a council supply depot. When the human ambassador brought this information to the council meeting, She was told the footage was unclear and possibly faked. The room went quiet. No one stood with her. Not even one voice said, "Let's look into it." That silence said everything. It wasn't just neglect. It was betrayal. On Earth, the reaction was immediate. The government declared a day of mourning. Across cities, people gathered in streets, lighting candles and holding each other. There was no shouting, no chaos. It's just deep, silent grief. But inside that grief, something else was growing. Anger. Not wild or reckless, but controlled. Focused. A message was broadcast from Earth's central station. It wasn't filled with threats. It wasn't even loud. It was simple, quiet, and firm. We have tried peace. We followed every rule. We believed in unity. But after today, we cannot ignore the truth. This is not about misunderstanding. This is about power. We are done pretending. People across the human colonies heard it. Workers stopped in the middle of their shift and just stood there, listening. Pilots gripped their controls a little tighter. Scientists looked at each other and nodded. Soldiers in training stopped marching and stared at the sky. Something had changed. No one gave direct orders. But everywhere, things started to move. Defense networks that had been silent for years were quietly brought online. Old bunkers were cleaned. Hidden data systems were unlocked. In the outer colonies, engineers worked late nights building things no one talked about. Humanity wasn't launching war. Not yet. But they were no longer trusting the Council to protect them. They were taking their future into their own hands. Even some aliens began to whisper behind closed doors. Maybe the humans were right. Maybe the Council isn't as honest as we thought. A few diplomats from minor species quietly sent messages to Earth, offering support, or at least saying they understood. But none dared say it out loud. Not yet. Back in the Council Hall, humans still showed up to meetings. They still spoke with calm voices. They still listened. But everyone could feel it. The look in their eyes had changed. They weren't asking for respect anymore. They were waiting. And the galaxy was starting to realize humanity wasn't going to be patient forever. The Galaxy Council believed humanity would stay quiet. They thought humans would keep attending meetings, keep smiling, and keep playing by the rules. Maybe some emotional speeches here and there, a few protests, but nothing serious. They were wrong. Back on Earth and across the colonies, things had already started to shift. It didn't happen with a loud announcement or flashing lights. It happened quietly, calmly, like a door slowly closing, one by one. Human representatives stopped showing up to certain council events. Trade meetings were postponed. Science programs were paused for review. Earth's communication channels with the Council were still open, but they had become cold and formal. The biggest surprise came when humans pulled out of 3 major projects the Council had been planning for years. No explanation, just a simple message: we will not be participating at this time. The Council was confused, but not afraid. They still didn't understand what was really happening. Far from the Council's eyes, in the deep corners of human space, massive construction, zones were glowing under the light of distant suns. These weren't just colonies. They were shipyards. Quietly, without telling anyone, humanity had been building. For years, some called them ghost fleets. Others thought they were myths, but they were real. Entire squadrons of advanced warships had been created in secret, hidden in asteroid fields, deep space, and forgotten star systems. These ships were not old, rusty, or outdated. They were fast, sharp, silent. They had no need for pilots controlled by powerful AI systems built by human scientists who had seen what other species could do and decided to go further, while the Council had been laughing at Earth. Calling them weak, calling them soft humans, had been watching, learning, preparing. The first time one of these ships appeared, it didn't fire a single shot. It just entered a restricted zone near a human colony and hovered there. Council. Patrol ship demanded that it leave. It didn't. The patrol ship approached. Then its systems shut down. No damage, no attack. Just complete silence inside their ship. Their lights went off. Engines froze. Weapons wouldn't respond. Then the human ship sent one simple message: Do not come here again. The patrol ship turned back. No one died. No war started. But the message was heard loud and clear across the galaxy. Earth was done being pushed around a few days later. Human colonies passed a joint declaration. They were officially stepping away from Council military protection. From now on, they would protect themselves, and they had the power to do it. The Council called an emergency meeting. The room was tense. Alien leaders argued. Some demanded action. Others warned that pushing humans could backfire. But no one really knew what Earth was planning next. Back on Earth, people felt something different too. Not fear, not revenge. Pride, for the first time in years. They weren't just reacting. They weren't asking for help. They weren't waiting. To be treated fairly, they were standing up. Farmers, engineers, teachers, pilots, everyone knew things had changed. News stations showed the ships, not to scare people, but to remind them, we are not helpless. Even in deep space, some alien ships stayed farther away from human borders. They didn't want trouble. It had seen what happened to the patrol ship. The Council still tried to act normal. But the balance had shifted. They had pushed too far, and now the quiet humans they had once ignored were showing a strength that Council hadn't expected. But the humans weren't attacking. They weren't trying to take over. Not yet. They were watching. Waiting. The Council. You still had time to fix things. But that time was running out. The silence from Earth was louder than words. The Galaxy Council kept holding meetings, hoping humans would return to the table and talk things out. They sent messages filled with polite language. We hope to restore unity. Let us move forward together, and there has been a misunderstanding. But Earth didn't answer, not with words. Instead, humans started protecting their own trade routes. When Council patrol ships approached, they were politely asked to turn away. If they didn't listen, their systems would suddenly freeze. Engines shut down, weapons offline, no damage, no noise, just silence. Then they would be allowed to leave. It's unharmed, but embarrassed. One by one, Council forces stopped entering human zones. The shift was clear. Earth wasn't asking for respect anymore. It was taking it in one corner of the galaxy. A human mining colony came under threat. A criminal group, one known for attacking weak planets, tried to raid it, thinking it would be easy. They never even reached the surface. Human defense drones met them in orbit. No loud battles, no messy fights, just clean, sharp action. Within minutes, the raider ships were disabled. Some were pulled in by tractor beams and locked down. The rest were pushed back into space, unable to move. The message was simple. Humans were not to be messed with. When the Council heard about it, they were shocked. Not because humans had defended themselves, but because they did it. It's better than expected, faster, smarter, with technology that many species thought humans didn't have. Some began to whisper that Earth had been hiding its strength all along. And they were right. The truth was, humans never forgot history. Back on Earth, people still remembered what it felt like to be colonized, controlled, and ignored. They knew what it meant to be treated as less, so they made a decision long ago. If they ever reached the stars, they would never let it happen again. The Council had laughed when humans joined. They thought Earth was small, emotional, too new to understand the galaxy. But what they didn't realize was that humans had learned the hardest way by surviving. And now, survival wasn't enough. Now humans wanted dignity, respect, and peace, but real peace, not silence and fake smiles. Meanwhile, inside the Council, things were falling apart. Some alien leaders wanted to punish Earth, saying humans were acting too bold. Others warned that pushing harder would only make things worse. One of the older members said, "They tried to be our friends. We turned them into something else." That truth hit hard. Some species, especially the smaller ones, began to secretly support humans. They were tired of being treated like tools too, tired of being used and ignored. Earth became a symbol not of war, but of standing up in deep space. A meeting took place on a quiet moon, far from Council eyes. A few ships landed, humans, and a few alien leaders who had the courage to come in secret. No cameras, no loud speeches, just quiet talks. They didn't talk about revenge. They talked about balance, real unity, the kind built on fairness and off fear. The talks didn't last long. Just a few hours. But when the ships left that moon, something had changed. The galaxy didn't know it yet. But a new alliance was forming, not based on power, but on trust. Earth was no longer standing alone. The Council had pushed to forend. Now, everything was shifting. The quiet humans, the ones no one took seriously, were now the center of attention. Not by force, by action, by proof. And while they still wore calm faces and spoke in soft voices, everyone knew they were done being quiet. For years, the Galaxy Council had believed it was unshakable. Its rules, its systems, its control had worked for centuries. But now, cracks were showing. Not because of a war, not because of violence, but because of quiet resistance. And at the center of it all was Earth. Humanity was doing something the Council didn't expect. They weren't fighting with anger. They weren't attacking planets or making threats. Instead, they were leading by example. In quiet corners of space, planets that had once depended on the Council started reaching out to Earth. They didn't send full governments or armies, just messages. Messages like, "We saw what you did. We heard how you protected your people. We want to talk." And humans replied, not with pride, but with calm understanding. On a remote trade station, a group of alien workers were being underpaid and overworked under Council contracts. For years they had complained, but no one listened. Then, one day, a human cargo ship arrived. It didn't bring weapons. It brought supplies, food, clean water, repair kits. The crew didn't say much. It just helped. When the station commander demanded to know why they interfered, the human captain replied, "Because someone had to." That moment was shared across thousands of networks. It wasn't loud or flashy, but it was honest. And it spread like fire. People, human and alien, started asking questions. Why do the Council leaders have all the power? Why are some planets always told to wait while others are heard immediately? Why does Earth get punished for asking fair questions? The Council tried to stop the talk. They shut down some news channels, sent out clarification messages. The truth had already spread, and then something happened that shook the Council to its core. A large border colony, not human but neutral for decades, announced they were stepping away from Council control. They weren't joining Earth, but they were leaving the old system. Their reason? "We saw what happened to humanity. We don't want that future for our children." That line was repeated across a dozen other systems the Council called for. A special emergency gathering. For the first time in years, fear was visible in their voices. They weren't afraid of war. They were afraid of losing control. A few voices in the chamber still wanted to act tough, force them back in line. They said, "Remind them who's in charge." But others were starting to shift. They saw the truth. They knew that trying to control humans only made them stronger, smarter, bolder. Meanwhile, Earth remained calm. Its leaders didn't call for violence. They didn't celebrate the collapse of old systems. Instead, they offered something simple. If anyone wants to stand for fairness, for truth, for peace that is earned, not forced, you are welcome beside us. It wasn't a demand. It was an invitation, and many accepted it. Ships began moving slowly, quietly from Council zones to neutral areas. Scientists, diplomats, even families who believed in something better. They weren't joining an army. We're joining a new idea, one based on respect. The Council watched, helpless, as power slipped from their hands. But Earth didn't laugh. They didn't seek revenge. They remembered what it felt like to be ignored, to be pushed aside. And they didn't want anyone else to go through that again. Across the stars, lights began to shift. News stations lit up, trade routes redrawn, old barriers removed. The galaxy wasn't falling apart, it was waking up. And at the heart of it all stood humanity, not perfect, not all-powerful, but strong enough to say, We're done being silent. Ready to lead with anyone who wants to build something better. The stars looked the same, but everything had changed. For the first time in many years, hope was spreading across the galaxy. Not the false kind printed on posters, but the kind felt deep inside hearts. Not because a new government took over, or because a war was won, but because ordinary people had started standing up for what was right. At the center of it all was Earth. Not because they were the strongest, not because they were perfect, but because they had said enough, and they had meant it. Across many planets, things began to shift quietly. Workers spoke up without fear. Small colonies, once too scared to question orders, started setting their own rules. Not wild rebellion, but slow, peaceful change. And Earth helped not by controlling, but by listening. Human ships no longer flew just for trade or defense. They flew to deliver clean water, to fix broken satellites, to build schools on planets the Council had forgotten. Sometimes they came just to talk, to sit with people who felt like no one cared about them anymore. It wasn't part of a plan. It was just human nature to help. To protect. To care. Even species that once laughed at Earth now quietly admired them. They saw how humans treated the weak, how they forgave even when they had every reason to be angry. It didn't happen overnight, but slowly something amazing started to grow, a new kind of alliance. Not a council built on fear and control, but a union built on trust. Different species began signing agreements, not forced contracts, but promises. Promises to protect each other, to share knowledge, to give fair voice to all. It had no single leader, but Earth was always at the table, not at the head, not demanding anything, just present.com. Strong, the Galaxy Council still existed. It was smaller now, less powerful. Many of its old members had left, some changed sides. Others simply faded into the background. They had lost the respect of the people, not because they were defeated in war, but because they refused to grow. In one quiet moment, on a peaceful space station far from the central planets, a meeting took place. There were no flashing lights, no media, just leaders from different worlds, human and alien, sitting in a circle, sharing stories. One of the elders from a distant moon colony spoke. "I used to believe humans were weak," they said. "Too emotional, too chaotic. But I was wrong. You're not weak. You're just alive. And you remind the rest of us what that feels like." Everyone in the room stayed silent for a moment. Then a human replied softly, "We just wanted to be treated fairly. It's all we ever asked." And now, they were. The galaxy had finally heard them. Not because they shouted the loudest, but because they stood their ground. Because when the council pushed too far, humans didn't fall apart. They got smarter, stronger, kinder, and they built something better, not just for themselves, but for everyone. Across the stars, stories began to change. Children in far-off worlds no longer grew up fearing the council. They grew up hearing about Earth, about the people who stood up. Not with weapons, but with courage. About the humans who didn't want to rule, just to be respected. And because of that, they earned something more powerful than fear. They earned trust, and in the end, that trust lit up the galaxy brighter than any weapon ever could. Humanity had arrived, not as conquerors, but as leaders. Quiet, steady, unshakable, and the stars would never forget.